The grand hall of the Galactic Council buzzed with a quiet tension that reverberated through its soaring arches. The chamber, a gleaming marvel of alien architecture, seemed to pulse with the anxious energy of its occupants. Representatives from 100 different worlds, each species more exotic than the last, filled the tiered seating that encircled the central platform. And at the center of it all, Captain Morg West stood, surveying the scene with a calm, calculating gaze. Morg adjusted the collar of his Terran ambassador's uniform, the dark fabric a stark contrast to the vibrant colors worn by the other diplomats. The fabric was stiff, new, he still wasn't used to the formalities of his new role. Not long ago, he'd been a soldier, commanding troops on distant worlds. Now, he was Earth's voice among the stars, and today, that voice needed to be steady. The Vornax were late, as usual, a deliberate move to unsettle the council. Morg smirked to himself. It was the kind of tactic he might have used back in his military days, psychological warfare at its finest. But he wasn't here to play games. He was here to stop a war before it began. The doors at the far end of the chamber slid open with a resonant hum, and every head turned as the Vornax delegation made their entrance. Leading them was Emperor Krax, a towering figure draped in obsidian armor that gleamed like polished stone. His eyes, cold and predatory, scanned the room as if searching for his next meal. Behind him, a massive, four-legged beast padded silently into the chamber. The Vornaxian apex predator, a creature of legend, feared across the galaxy. Its scales shimmered like liquid metal, and its eyes, slit-pupilled and unblinking, were fixed on Morg. A ripple of fear spread through the council. Even the more formidable species shifted uneasily in their seats. The predator was not just a symbol, it was a threat, a clear message from Krax to the rest of the galaxy. The Vornax Empire bows to no one. Morg, however, remained still, his gaze locked on Krax. The Emperor's lips curled into a smile, sharp and humorless. "Greetings, honored members of the Galactic Council," Krax began, his voice a deep rumble that seemed to reverberate through the very walls. "I trust you've been waiting eagerly for our arrival." Morg could feel the tension ratchet up another notch, but he kept his expression neutral. He had faced worse on the battlefields of distant moons, and he wasn't about to be intimidated now. The council chamber might be different from the war zones he knew, but the stakes were just as high. If this negotiation failed, it would be Earth that paid the price, as Krax continued his thinly veiled threats. Morg's mind worked quickly, analyzing, planning. The Vornax were predators, in every sense of the word, but there was always a way to outmaneuver even the most dangerous opponent. Today, he would have to prove it. He just needed the right moment, and he knew it was coming. The chamber was a cauldron of tension, the air thick with anticipation as Krax's voice reverberated through the hall. His words dripped with arrogance, each syllable a calculated jab at the council members who dared to stand against the Vornax Empire. The predator at his side growled low, a sound that sent shivers down the spines of all but one. Morg stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his posture relaxed. Almost casual. His eyes, however, were sharp, watching every movement, every flicker of expression from Krax and the council. The beast's growl was met with nothing more than a raised eyebrow from the Terran ambassador. "The strength of the Vornax Empire is unmatched," Krax declared, his gaze sweeping across the assembled diplomats. "We do not negotiate from a position of weakness, nor do we tolerate those who would dare challenge our supremacy." Morg could see the fear in the eyes of the council members, the way some shifted in their seats, avoiding Krax's gaze. The Vornax Emperor was playing his part perfectly, feeding on that fear, drawing power from it. But fear was a tool that could be turned against its wielder, and Morg was ready to do just that. "Impressive words, Emperor Krax," Morg interjected, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. All eyes turned to him, some with surprise, others with relief that someone had finally spoken up. "Your empire's strength is indeed formidable, and that creature by your side, truly magnificent." Krax's eyes narrowed, sensing something beneath Morg's calm tone. "It is more than magnificent. Human. It is the pinnacle of evolution, the apex of all predators." A creature that commands fear and respect across the galaxy. Fear and respect are powerful, certainly, Morg agreed, stepping forward slightly, drawing the room's attention back to him. But they are not the same thing. Respect can be earned in many ways, not just through power. Krax's lip curled in disdain. Are you suggesting that your people, weak as they are, have earned respect in the same way? Morg smiled, a small, enigmatic curve of his lips. Perhaps respect isn't just about power or fear. Perhaps it's about understanding, about recognizing strength in its many forms. Krax's eyes flicked to the Predator. Then back to Morg. Understanding? How quaint. Perhaps you would like to demonstrate this. Understanding. With my pet. The challenge hung in the air, a gauntlet thrown at Morg's feet. The council members looked at him with a mixture of horror and disbelief. Touching the beast was madness, it was certain death. But Morg's smile never wavered. With pleasure, Morg replied, his voice steady. He could feel the eyes of the entire chamber boring into him as he slowly approached the Predator. The creature's eyes locked onto his, its muscles coiled, ready to strike. The council held its collective breath, the tension thick enough to cut. Morg stopped just a few feet from the beast, his hand hovering in the air between them. The Predator growled, a low, menacing sound, but Morg didn't flinch. He reached out slowly, deliberately, and in that moment, the entire galaxy seemed to hold its breath, a moment that would define the future. The chamber was so silent, it seemed even the air dared not move. Morg's hand hovered inches from the Predator's head, the creature's breath hot and steady against his skin. Every muscle in the beast's body was tensed, a coiled spring of lethal force waiting to be unleashed. One wrong move, one sign of fear, and Morg knew he would be dead before the council could even gasp, but Morg didn't hesitate. His hand, steady as a rock, closed the final distance, fingers brushing against the smooth, cold scales of the Vornaxian Predator. The chamber seemed to pulse with the anticipation of what would happen next. Morg felt the ripple of muscle beneath the scales, a raw, untamed power that could rip him apart in seconds. But instead of attacking, the beast paused, its predatory gaze locking onto Morg's eyes, as if searching for something deeper. Morg's breath was slow. Controlled, his movements deliberate. He wasn't just touching the beast, he was communicating, conveying something far more profound than dominance or submission. There was no fear in his eyes, only respect and a quiet, unshakable resolve. The Predator blinked, a slow, deliberate motion that sent a shockwave of disbelief through the chamber. Then, in a gesture that left the council members dumbstruck, the beast lowered its head, a subtle but unmistakable sign of acknowledgement. It was not submission, but a recognition of something it had never encountered before, an equal. Morg's hand remained on the Predator's head, his fingers tracing the intricate patterns of its scales. The beast let out a low rumble, not a growl of warning, but a sound almost like a purr. The tension in the room snapped, the air rushing back into the lungs of the gathered diplomats, their shock palpable. Emperor Krax's expression was a mask of astonishment. His cold eyes wide with something he had not felt in a long time, uncertainty. The Predator, the symbol of Vornaxian supremacy, had acknowledged a human, a species they deemed inferior. This was not how the narrative was supposed to go. You see, Emperor, Morg said, his voice calm, almost soothing, strength comes in many forms. It's not just about power or fear. It's about understanding, about connecting in ways that transcend words and species. Krax's jaw clenched, the arrogance in his eyes flickering with something more dangerous, respect tinged with rage. He had underestimated this human, and now the entire council had seen the Vornax Empire's greatest symbol of power shown up by a Terran diplomat. Morg slowly withdrew his hand, stepping back from the Predator, which remained still, watching him with an intelligence that seemed to understand the significance of the moment. Morg met Krax's gaze, unflinching. You've made your point, Krax finally growled, his voice low, the edges of his pride fraying. But do not think this changes everything, human. The Vornax do not forget. Neither do we, Morg replied, his tone steady, unyielding. But perhaps we can move forward, not as enemies, but as equals. Respect is a two-way street, Emperor. It's a lesson I think we both can benefit from. The chamber was still thick with tension, but it was different now, charged with the possibility of change rather than destruction. Morg had done more than just pet a predator, he had shifted the balance of power with a single, fearless gesture, and the galaxy would never forget it. The predator's low purr resonated through the chamber, a hum of contentment that contrasted sharply with the stunned silence of the council. Morg stepped back, his hand falling to his side, and for a brief moment, he felt the weight of the entire galaxy resting on his shoulders. But he stood tall, his gaze steady as he met the eyes of every delegate in the room, including the cold, calculating stare of Emperor Krax. The Emperor's expression had shifted, the arrogance replaced by something more complex, a mixture of respect and reluctant admiration. For the first time, Krax seemed to see Morg not just as a representative of humanity, but as an equal, someone who had not only matched him but had done so in a way that defied the very nature of the Vornax. Perhaps we've both underestimated one another, Krax finally said, his voice quieter, the edge of menace softened by grudging respect. He glanced at the predator, which now sat calmly beside him, its deadly aura tempered by Morg's touch. You've proven that there is more to your species than I anticipated. Morg inclined his head slightly. And you've shown the galaxy the strength of the Vornax. But strength is only one aspect of power. True power lies in the ability to understand, to adapt, and to build something greater than fear. The words hung in the air, and Morg could sense the shift in the room. The council members, who had moments before been frozen in fear, now looked at him with something new in their eyes, hope. The balance of power had changed, not through force, but through a demonstration of mutual respect, of a new path forward. Krax's gaze hardened slightly, as if weighing his options. He was a predator, but he was also a ruler, and Morg could see the calculations running through his mind. War, he realized, would not be as simple as it once seemed. Humanity had shown a different kind of strength, one that couldn't be easily crushed or dismissed. Very well, Krax said after a long pause. The Vornax are willing to negotiate, on equal terms. His voice held the promise of a new beginning, a step away from the brink of war. It wasn't surrender, it was a mutual acknowledgement of power, the kind that could only come from two sides that had tested each other and found unexpected depth. The council chamber erupted into quiet murmurs of relief and cautious optimism. Morg stepped back to his place, but he could feel the eyes of the galaxy on him, a silent acknowledgement of what had just been achieved. Earth's place in the cosmos had shifted, and with it, the future of countless worlds. As the final negotiations began, the tension in the room gradually eased, replaced by a tentative sense of hope. The predator lay at Krax's feet, a silent guardian of the new peace being forged. Morg listened carefully, contributing where necessary, guiding the conversation toward a fair and lasting agreement. By the time the negotiations concluded, an accord had been reached, one that preserved the dignity and interests of both the Galactic Council and the Vornax Empire. It was a fragile peace, but it was real, and it was more than anyone had hoped for when the day began. As Morg left the chamber, the weight on his shoulders lightened. He had done more than just avert a war, he had shown the galaxy that humanity was a force to be reckoned with, not through brute strength, but through the courage to reach out, to understand, and to connect. Outside the council hall, the stars glittered in the void, ancient and unchanging. But in that vast darkness, a new light had been kindled, a spark of possibility that could one day illuminate the galaxy. Morg looked up at the stars and smiled, knowing that the future was not written in the cold light of distant suns, but in the hearts of those willing to shape it, and he knew, without a doubt, that humanity would continue to shape it, in ways that no one, Emperor Krax included, had ever imagined.